Hey everyone, and welcome back. I'm Kelly George from Fearless Homeschool, and in this workshop, Mavanwi Dibben will be giving us some great ideas for studying history and geography, which are two of my favourite topics. Mavanwi has been working in education since 2000. She has 11 years direct experience as a music and English teacher, teaching primary and high school across the public, Catholic, independent and religious sectors, with 2 years working with special needs students in high school. She has also performed in educational music shows for Music Aviva in schools and was a volunteer and committee member for the Home Education Association and has been interviewed several times for various national news publications on current issues about home education in Australia. So she came to home ed through her partner, who mentioned it when their first daughter was a few months old, and being her, she researched it very heavily and looked at all the different home education styles while also studying a graduate diploma of education for high school through UNE. She started with the classical style with the well-trained mind for her daughter's primary education, and her daughter is now in high school. She teaches herself, and Mavanwi simply helps her think through what she would like to learn. And she is very thrilled to have a self-motivated, lifelong learner who is completely comfortable with being herself without external peer pressure forcing her to conform to anybody else's opinion of who she should be. And I can give that one a big round of applause because that is such a huge benefit of homeschooling. So Mavanwi is repeating a lot of the learning that she did with her daughter's primary education with her 7-year-old son, and is finding herself a little less structured this time around with his education, but is still following the broad structure of the classical trivium. Mavanwi started EdConsult in 2019 and has been filling it with articles on home ed across Australia with the aim of helping home educators be well informed to advocate for themselves and to feel confident in their own journeys. She helps parents to make sense of the wide range of choices considering their children's education, whether that be placement in primary, secondary or tertiary education, home education curriculum or registration support and advocacy. She has helped countless families understand their own home cultures to find a method or approach that respects their family's needs and their children's interests, which gives them somewhere to start and encouraging them to modify their approaches to suit their changing needs. She is also a volunteer deckhand on the James Craig tall ship and has sailed thousands of nautical miles, including from Sydney to Hobart, while learning a whole new language of seamanship. She has just enrolled in TAFE for her 6th tertiary education qualification, this time in the maritime course of coxswain. She has Bachelor of Performance from the Conservatorium of Music, part of a law degree from Macquarie, qualifying as a conveyancer, a graduate diploma of education in music and English, and a general purpose hand marine certificate. She's also a professional musician with the ensemble Pastance and specialises in early music and Celtic music. So who knows what the future holds with an eclectic mix of interests like that, but she is a lifelong learner and hopes her enthusiasm will rub off on those around you. Alright, so I'll pass you on over to Mavanwi now, and she can go through how she covers history and geography with her family and give us some great ideas.
Most kids that I've spoken to over the past 12 years of teaching in schools have stated unequivocally that they hate history, and what is the point of learning it anyway? Ken Burns, a documentary filmmaker, was asked this question in 2015 and responded, "You can't possibly know where you are or where you're going if you don't know where you've been." I would go further to say that if you choose not to study the past, you choose to make every decision moving forward in ignorance, which is a waste of energy, time, and opportunity, causing you to miss out on being the best person you can be, all because you thought history was boring. History is not a subject. History is the subject. It is the record of human experience, both personal and communal. It is the story of the unfolding of human achievement in every area: science, literature, art, music, and politics. It is mandatory to study history geography from foundation through to year 6 or stage 3 in the Australian curriculum. Each state and territory has various Australian curriculum-based documents to refer to. Not all states require you to refer to a particular curriculum when registering for home education, Make sure to read the guidelines for each registration body to clarify your requirements for registration. See the Appendix A for a list of links for each state and territory in your handouts. In New South Wales, for example, NESA requires history and geography to be studied from stages 1 through to 3, and then from stage 4, history and geography become selective subjects from a pool of subjects in the History, Society and its Environment cluster. From Year 7, a student may choose to study history and geography, history or geography, or any of the other subjects on the screen at any point in the 4 years of study. It is practically impossible to study history without geography, as the people and events had to be happening somewhere, and so simply registering for history and geography is the easiest way forward when writing your plan to home educate. You must also include Australian-specific history in your program of study. This can be achieved through going to museums, visiting historical houses or places, engaging with the local Indigenous cultural centres, visiting reenactment villages, participating in living history projects in your local community, or reading books such as the historical fiction by Jackie French called Tom Appleby, Convict Boy. Really good book. One resource I really love is The Upside Down History of Down Under. We read this together as a family. In schools across Australia, 11 years are devoted to the study of history, and yet when I left school as a student who was interested in history, I knew very little, and that knowledge was disjointed or confused. I went on to study at the Conservatorium of Music in Sydney as an early music specialist, focusing on music from 900 to 1700 CE. I felt like I was stumbling around in the Dark Ages, literally. I had big gaps in my knowledge that could not be quickly sealed. If I had received the opportunity to study history the way my home-educated children have enjoyed, I would have had a more in-depth experience at university, which was a missed opportunity that I only appreciate in hindsight. Standing on the shoulders of giants is a metaphor which means using the understanding gained by major thinkers who have gone before in order to make intellectual progress. Without history, you will blunder blindly forward, just as President Donald Trump is doing right now. Here is a man with great power and responsibilities, with a duty of care to the whole world, and yet he fails to grasp the most rudimentary understanding of the historical interactions between Asia, the Middle East, and the West, which has been the single most dangerous cause of conflict in our world today. If he knew his history, he may be a little more restrained in his tweets due to a better understanding of cause and effect over time. Knowing the blunders of giants that have come before him could save much heartache, disruption, and loss in our world today. The revelation. Teach history through story. Everybody loves a story. Humans have used stories for our entire history to hand down knowledge from one generation to the other through song or epic poetry. Great heroes, fantastical beasts, curious creatures, stories of bravery and of discovery, all to help make sense of our world and where we fit in.
One of the ways to help make the learning stick really well is once you've read the book, a book on a particular part of history, is to then go to a museum that has an exhibition, such as the mummy exhibition that came to the Powerhouse Museum a few years ago. We literally finished the last chapter of this book in the car on the way to the exhibition. And then when we walked in and got to touch a sarcophagus from the same city that this book was set, and also from the same period of time. So the woman who was in the sarcophagus was actually walking around in this book effectively. That was the way to think about it, which was really chilling and amazing. My daughter also wrote a piece in Historical about the benefits of linking a novel
with a exhibition and how the combination makes the whole experience of learning ancient history, such as Egypt, come alive.
My go-to resource for stages 1 to 2 has to be Story of the World by Susan Weisbauer. I have adopted the classical trivium structure of teaching the 70 centuries of human history around the world over a 4-year period and relating all the other subjects in some way with that period of history we are studying at the time. I include literature of the time or historical fiction or movies for English, any relevant mathematical discoveries, art and music of the period, and if an opportunity arises, a sport from that period or culture for PDHPE. Science is a little more specific with each period, however. The historical periods flow like this, and this can be done from any primary age grade, or it may be more practical to be followed together as a family. Grade 1, Ancient Man to the Fall of the Roman Empire, and the science study is biology to coincide with what the early Greeks could observe around them. Grade 2, Medieval History, 450 to around 1600. And the science study is geology, the beginning of the mining and metallurgy and understanding the world. Weather and climate science, the early sailors expanded the understanding of weather. And astronomy, the medieval period saw great leaps in astronomy study. Early modern history from 1600 to about 1850, science of chemistry all year, as this period of history saw the beginnings of the understanding of chemistry. Modern history from 1850 to 2010, science is physics. In an ideal history education, this pattern of study would happen 3 times over a 12-year period, creating a very well-trained mind, far better equipped to becoming a leader of the world, most definitely standing upon the shoulders of giants by then. Usually 3 times a week, aiming for 2 chapters of the Story of the World per week is what you should aim for. So, for example, when introducing the Celts in Britain to my 7-year-old during the early medieval period, we would read a chapter from the Story of the World, Volume 2, and the child would colour in a picture relating to the story, if they can colour and listen at the same time, that is. The colouring in or art project can be ticked off as art for recording purposes. Then I would ask the child to summarise or narrate back to me what we just read about. I would then write that narration down or encourage the child to get into writing that down themselves in a few full sentences initially, and then in an outline form when they are more capable in grades 5 to 8. If you can get your child to write summaries before grade 5, well, good on you. But what is most likely to happen is you will be encouraging them to speak in full sentences and show them what they say when you write it down for them. Then we may look up an encyclopedia book or online resource to see images and print an image out to include on the timeline. I use an Avery label sheet to make the process simple for the child to then stick onto page. Putting stickers onto a timeline is great for their fine motor skill development too.
Okay, so this is the ancient scroll, or what we used for a timeline. So with the timelines, you want to have, we learnt this the hard way, you want to have a nice wide space. So we're talking 2 inches, 5 centimetres, and also only for 25 years intervals. Any closer than that, then you will run out of space to note things. Now you'll note that there's colours. Can you tell me what the colours are, please?
Brown is science.
Mm-hmm.
Purple is events. Blue is,
Architecture, isn't it?
yes, art, and then war and conflict.
So war and conflict is the red.
Yes.
Okay, and that's just a way of differentiating different things that happen. Now, as we go back in time, which was
Forward in time.
when we started this project, and as you can see, it's incredibly extensive. Keep going. This is about 3 years worth of work.
Yes.
Keep going.
Oh,
And the challenge we had a few years ago was that we didn't leave enough room, and that happened. Which is pretty terrifying. So we have 250 years between each of the 2 inches or 5 centimeters, and it was a bit of a disaster. So make sure you have a long space. Yes, no, you improvise really well. And there was a lot of conflict there too, as you can see, just at a glance because of the red that you've noted. When we started it, and this is a nice thing to do, especially for younger kids, primary kids, is to have pictures representing various things that happened, just to make the timeline stand out and be a little bit more engaging. And the really nice thing about doing it on a really big roll like this is that you can then continue on in time and not have to have lots of different resources. You just have it all in one roll, and then that represents many, many, many years worth of work. And it stores nicely too.
A timeline is highly recommended to help the child put the events, arts, or architecture, conflicts, or scientific discovery into context of what else was happening in the time, at that time, in the world around. Next, we will colour in a map which links geography with the events. This will then enable a brief discussion using the names of the people or the dates or the environments of the people in the story for the day at the simple level to reiterate what we read about. For a more in-depth study, we would then choose a historical novel such as Beowulf to then bring the Angles, Saxons and Jutes culture alive and help give flesh and bones to the peoples who became the Anglo-Saxons and dominant culture of England in the early Middle Ages. The historical novels approach is the most important way to make history brilliant to the child. That is how you help the learning stick, and that is how to make history exciting and a little bit addictive.
Around the World with Historical Fiction and Folk Tales by Beth Bartleson Zarian is a book of lists of books, effectively. It's a list of books graded K to 8, and they are all award-winning historical fiction. It's a really great book. I use it when I'm planning to work out what books to buy. I've got world history here, for example. If I go to the prehistory section, and this is saying prehistory through to the ancient world to the 5th century. So then it has grades kindergarten through to grade 2, and it has 2 books that it recommends for that period of history. Then in grades 3 to 6, it starts there with Alexander's Scroll. I'm reading that to my 7-year-old son at this stage on the first Hanukkah. And these are all fiction. It's not non-fiction. So it's really engaging, well-written books. Note, I also put down here on the side whether or not I purchased it as a Kindle book, so that I know not to look on the bookshelf, and also if I bought it overseas in the UK book depository or something like that, I write that in too, so that I can keep track of when the book arrives. Each section has a little précis on what the book's about, so you can have a chat with your child about the storyline and see if they're interested before actually purchasing the book. If you can get the books at the library, congratulations, but often you can't get some of these books in the local library, which is a bit frustrating. But this is an excellent resource, one I use every year when I'm trying to find new historical fiction to read.
This first sweep of history is all about giving little pegs of knowledge that the child can come back to in their second sweep of history in grade 5, when the child begins to make logical links to the events and people and start to see the cause and effect over history. Watch this video on a discussion with a 7-year-old in his second year of history, working with the map printouts from the Story of the World program.
From Rome to Canterbury, okay, we're learning about the geography of England in the medieval period. So, King Ethelbert allowed St. Augustine to start a church in Canterbury. Find the city of Canterbury in Britain and circle it in green. So let's see if we can find Canterbury on this map. You got green? Well done. That's it. It's a nice green. Where's Canterbury? It's in which country? Can you find it? It starts with C. Ah, it's in England, isn't it? Excellent. Now, use a red pencil to show the route St. Augustine might have taken if he had travelled from Rome to Canterbury by boat. So, if he went by boat from Rome, where's Rome? Can you see where Rome is? It's at the bottom of the boot, isn't it? Okay, so if he went by boat all the way to Canterbury, which is right on the coast of England, it's near the coast. See up here? Where would he have gone if he went by boat? Remember,
he would have gone through the Mediterranean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean all the way through there and down to Canterbury.
So do you think he would have gone all the way up over north in the North Sea? Because that's quite a journey. Is there a way to go?
I think.
Yep, that's called the English Channel there. So I'd like you to get a blue pencil. Oh, sorry, red. No, I said red, didn't I? So go from Rome to Canterbury by boat. Show the route that you may have taken. And hold the sheet with the other hand so it doesn't go wayward. That's it. Through the Mediterranean Sea, into the Atlantic Ocean, and then into the English Channel, arriving near Canterbury. Well done. Now, what about, can you use a brown colour this time to show the route St. Augustine might have taken if he had travelled mostly by land? So he's coming from Rome again.
Yoink.
There you go. He can't go all the way by land, can he? Why not? What's this? We just talked about it.
The English place.
Yeah, the English Channel, it's
Yeah.
called. Yep, so he can't go by land across there. Not then, because it's a waterway. But did you know that now you can go by land across there? Do you know how? It's a bit tricky. I've done it. You go by tunnel. There is a tunnel between England and France, and you can drive through it or you can catch a train through it. And I've caught the train under the water between England and France. But back in the olden days, when St. Augustine was travelling, there was no tunnel, so you had to go by boat. Now, let's have a look. Use a blue crayon to colour in the Mediterranean Sea, the North Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. Now, you already know where those are because you've been doing these maps for a while and you're doing very well. What one's that?
Atlantic Ocean.
Atlantic Ocean, well done.
Why is it so close to England and Wales?
Well, England and Wales
Okay,
border
right.
onto the Atlantic Ocean. Everything has to border on something.
Not water.
Yeah. The water borders the coast.
Hey, what if Africa was in the middle of like 30 other places around it?
Africa is many, many different countries, isn't it? So it's already got lots of borders all around it. Now, where are you?
Mediterranean.
Right. Go on, colour in the Mediterranean Sea. Do your best colouring in. I like your pencil grip. That's very nice. It's good when you hold the pencil grip. It helps you with
What's
your colouring
there?
in. It's a little island.
Called.
I'm going to have to look it up. I've forgotten that island.
Go onto Google Maps and
Yeah,
find it. So
that's a good solution.
it'd be pretty.
And then we can find out what that's called. What about the North Sea?
Where's that?
Hmm.
Oh, found it.
Mm.
Okay.
Good job. Can you remind me, do you remember last week when we were studying history, we were talking about the Celtic people, and you're related to the Celtic people, aren't you?
Not really.
Yes, you are. Your grandmother is, your grandmother is 100% Irish as far as DNA testing is concerned, right? From Ancestry.com. So she is 100% Irish, which means you're substantially Irish. Celtic, sorry.
Can I put this back now?
Just look at this. Tell me, can you remember when the Angles and the Saxons came to England? Where did the Celtic people move to? A lot of them moved away from England. Where did they move to? But where did the Celts move to when the Angles and the Saxons moved into England? They moved to... They got pushed out.
All the way into Ireland, England and Scotland.
Not England, they were in England.
Wales.
Yeah, Wales. And what was this little one here in the end called? Cornwall. Yeah, Cornwall. But why did they make it blue? Why do we make it blue? What did they do to their faces?
They made their faces blue.
Yeah, they did that.
They
did, to look fierce. It was terrifying.
In school these days, history is taught as workbooks and worksheets with the content focused on the most exciting bits, with no link, continuity or explanation as to the relevance of these moments in time to the here and now, completely missing the opportunity for the child to create a personal connection to the people on the page. This is where the home educator enjoys a real advantage. In the video, bringing the child's attention to his cultural heritage as being Celtic helps him to make a personal connection with the people who moved to Scotland, Ireland, Wales and Cornwall after the King Ethelbert invited the Angles, Saxons and Jutes as mercenaries into England. They are his people, his DNA, and what helps make him who he is. Research by the New South Wales Department back in 2003 demonstrated that the significance of knowledge to students was a key factor in the students' development and understanding. This means that kids need the information to be relevant to themselves and how they see themselves in the world, in order for the information they are learning to make sense. This is especially true during the early stages 1 and 2, while the child's appreciation of the world beyond their own backyard is developing. However, kids who have lost their curiosity before finishing primary school, which sadly happens a great deal in my professional experience, tend not to be able to progress beyond only seeing the world from their point of view. This next step in cognitive development should be happening in the next sweep of 70 centuries, grades 5 to 8. When you begin your second sweep of human history, starting in grade 5 to 8, you could simply reuse the story of the world again, perhaps adding some of the activities previously skipped or things you didn't use the previous time, adding a higher expectation in how the student summarizes the information or some other way to acknowledge the child's writing development and interaction with source material at this stage in their learning. You could also purchase a different program, as I did, called History Odyssey by Pandia Press. This one uses the same structure of historical periods as the classical trivium. My daughter preferred having control of her learning and wanted to have a list to tick through on her own. If you are unschooling or using a child-led approach, that doesn't preclude you from introducing the idea of following a timeline or thinking about history in a chronological way. You may just go about how you show your learning with less of a focus on writing in a program and more of a focus on discussion, as seen in the video with the younger child. This is a totally valid way to learn and should be encouraged in the child, whatever age they may be. Other ways to enliven your learning of history and geography could be through dressing up, giving a speech at your local homeschool group on a person you find interesting, cooking food from that time, researching into what work was done then and what the environment was like, what tools they were using, watching historical fiction or drama or historical reality TV programs. Horrible histories is a big deal in my household. Playing board games like Timelines or games from the period of history you were learning about. What did children do in the time period studied? What do people do for fun? After you have done your first sweep of history to even halfway through your second sweep, it may suit your child to change the focus of history to be within a frame rather than simply all of human history in a chronological approach. You may wish to think about teaching history from another point of view, such as an history of science. As an example, the History of Science program from Build Your Library has obvious benefits in high school as taking a cross-curricular approach into joining science, mathematics, English, history, geography, art, and music, all in one themed program. For my daughter, who isn't really interested in studying chemistry all this year, found that that approach to science through history made it all far more attractive. Focus on your child's strengths and interests, and then frame history through that lens. History of music and art development, or a history of technology from the wheel to the quantum clock. Choose whatever humans have been involved in as a theme, and then follow that theme through, chronologically retelling the story. One of the nice things that my daughter has done in her development as a historian is to present her learning in a magazine format. So she would write an outline about some person she was learning about or an event in history. Then she would fill that out into a short essay and then publish it in Canva online, a free program for publishing in a magazine format, say. And then she would then produce a beautiful page with illustrations in the format ready for printing. And then we have a wonderful record of her history learning in a glossy, professional looking magazine that she can keep, yes, for registration purposes, but far more importantly, as a gift for family or friends for Christmas, or as a record of her own learning for her future. At this later stage in the older child's development, as an historian in stages 4 to 6, they will have developed the skills to analyse the content, then judge the merits of the information quality, and then synthesize the information into an informed opinion with finely tuned critical thinking skills. They can finally take part in the great conversation and contribute in an informed way to the society they find themselves in. May the future leaders of our world be home educated, with an emphasis on a study of history. So you've just finished watching the video on history and geography, why and how, and that's in the Australian Homeschooling Summit 2020. It was lovely to be able to do that. It is a subject that is close to my heart. There was a question from Beverly, I remember, something about where did I get the roll of paper from? So the roll of paper, just grab it. These ones. That's how I store it. I just store it sticking out of my bookcase. I have very limited space in my home. I just got this from Officeworks. Officeworks has it, and you can pick it up there pretty straightforward. Just this one's a bit shiny, and you have to watch what sort of pens you use on it. So don't let it kind of get don't use it too inky, because it'll sort of, yeah, won't be great. But improvise, work out what works, work out whether you use, you know, a whole bunch of different colored pens, whatever works for you. It really doesn't matter. It's not prescriptive, but what does work for everybody is the size of it. It's small and yet incredibly expansive. So hopefully that answers your question. You can also get some paper at IKEA. I vaguely remember getting a roll for one of those easels. So that's an option. Any suggestion on where to find Around the World with Historical Fiction book? Yeah, I wondered if that question would come up. So that book, which actually I couldn't find this morning, that book, a friend of mine down here and myself were looking for it at the same time. It is only available, it's out of print. So generally speaking, secondhand. Abe books, like if you just type in the book, and if you go to my ebook, you'll have all of the information you need in there. You might be able to find a secondhand copy
I didn't have too much trouble finding it, but it is an invaluable resource. I have another one that you might be interested in. This isn't history based, but it's another book of lists. This one this time is called, hopefully that's not coming backwards, Books That Build Character. So they're kind of same format as the historical fiction book, in that you've got all your books listed. Well, that's not a good example. Where's a good one? So chapter 4, this one. There you go. So you've got things like the unicorn and the lake, and it'll give you a blurb. This is myths, legends, and folk tales. That's not really a great example, but the idea is if you want to teach them values like how to be trustworthy, or how to live nicely with other Homo sapiens, which is something we all hope and dream for, this book could be quite helpful in finding the right text to tell that story to make it stick for the child. So, what other questions have we got? So I'm just going to check in here. Any suggestions? Found that. What else have we got? So stick your questions in. I'm happy to answer it. Doesn't matter if it's off topic. I'm easy. I haven't got that many questions by the looks of it, unless I'm looking in the wrong space. Sounds like I was really clear in the video. Okay, good. When you started with the role, did you plot the historical points on the timeline in your own writing and words until your children had mastered reading, writing, or did you start the timeline role? Okay, so I didn't actually do a timeline role with my daughter until we started the Odyssey program. It wasn't something that was necessarily pushed in the Story of the World program that we were doing. It was a suggestion in the Odyssey program, which I highly recommend. I found that really good. And that one's secular as well. So with her, she was fine. She's grade 5. She started writing in grade 5. I have a understanding of how that happened, but prior to grade 5 she was not interested in writing very much at all. So even just doing timelines would have been, so I didn't bother. But in hindsight, after doing the timeline with her grade 5 onwards, I decided that it was a valuable thing to do from a younger age, because it is quite an abstract study, history. It's really quite important to make it tangible somehow get in touch with it, besides words being said into your ears. You know, a bit kinesthetic in your learning style. So so what I'm doing for my son is to generally write it. I'm writing things like when St. Augustine arrived at Canterbury, and then he'll stick on an Avery sticker label, which I have here somewhere. There I have. So I have these massive Avery labels, laser white, whatever you call them. Anyway, they're stick-on labels. They're really good. You get 8 pictures on each label, well, each sheet of labels. You stick it in your printer. You look up Avery label online template. You type in the code, which is written on the front of your packet, and then you have this pre-formatted setup to then just cut and paste an image from anywhere. Don't worry about copyright. You're not doing anything with it. You're not selling it. It's just yours. So you can use whatever pictures you want. And then he sticks those onto the timeline. He's 7. His fine motor skill needs work. So it's a really good thing for him to do. And it's interactive. He gets to look at the picture and sort of see where it fits next to the Vikings on this side, and the fall of the Roman Empire on this side, and where's Byzantium happening here. And it's good. It's a good way of doing it, I think. He's not interested really in colouring in. So all those pictures in Story of the World, which my daughter was happy to colour in, he's not really into it. So I have to come up with whatever I can to get his fine motor skills growing, because of course everything is holistic in what you do. Every subject is shown through history for our family, and by doing it that way you can just be really efficient. So what was the question? The question was, did I start a timeline? And the answer is not the first time, second time, yes. And the good thing about it is they can go back when they go and do another sweep of history. He can go back and add more detail in between the spaces where I've got some significant dates. I'm not putting very much in there, so he's got heaps of room when he is capable of doing it himself later on. Yeah, the Book of Centuries thing. I nearly went down that road, but I just found it all too expensive. So this was really cheap, doing it the way I did it. I like to do things on the cheap because we don't get any support, financial support as home educators, so I do things on the cheap wherever I can. Book of Centuries is lovely. It's the Charlotte Mason product in that style. Living books, Book of Centuries, the idea being just, it's a timeline, but it's in a book. Go for it. And they also sell pictures that you can put on there as well. But again, the postage from the US is just nuts. The dollar, the US dollar at the moment is crazy. Just not doing it. Improvise, and you can have a great timeline doing it that way. But if you've already got it, great, congratulations, because I would have done that too. But I'm happy with the roll. So let me see if I find another question. Okay, I think I've answered Kobe's question. So yeah, Kobe, it's a bit of your work really until then, but that's, we're all learning. Not gel pens. Yeah, Beverly, probably not. I use, let me see. I have a container of them. It's just, are they where they're supposed to be? Of course not. Give me 1 second. I think I know where they are. There they are. So I have a tin that is just for the timeline or permanent marker stuff. And in here I have, Aldi right now I believe has the these textures on sale. They're very good. So we've got those for the timeline. We have them all in one place so that we can grab them and do our, history timeline specifically, but anything else you want to use a permanent marker on, we got it. Makes it very easy. It must be easy. Whatever we're doing here, it has to be easy because we're all way too busy for it to be too hard. Okay, so I've answered the question about where can you get that book. Hi, Tamara Kid. G'day, Beverly. I've said hi. Kelly's watching. G'day. Okay, so Living Books Press has, oh yeah, that's good to know. So Living Book Press has Book of Centuries for a reasonable price. Okay. There's Warwick. Please ask a question, Warwick, if you've got something you want to know. It doesn't matter if it's not about history, I really don't mind. Yep, sounds like I've answered all of those questions. I was very, very tempted to redo my video. I finished it end of February, I think, or was it the beginning of March? And then the world changed. And when the world changed, my talk could have changed with it. Namely, what a poignant example of when it is good to know your history when a pandemic hits the world. I think I was disparaging of a certain president in the video, drinking detergent and shining lights up orifices has reaffirmed that view, I feel. But the idea of decision makers who haven't read their history books and haven't understood when there is a major community drama, like the plague, for example, bubonic plague, or the droughts that hit Syria, right? I mean, that triggered mass migration and a civil war that is still raging today. And you need to know your history so you can make really good decisions on behalf of the globe. So we'll just have to wait with bated breath to see how that all plays out. And it's very interesting how different countries are handling it. So I was tempted to change the video, but I've decided no, it's fine. It's fine. Now I'm going to see if I can find another question. So, your best fun hands-on projects for history. Probably stuff that we've done with our co-op. So I'm part of a co-op called Fresh, which is family-run education Southern Highlands. That's where I live in New South Wales. I joined that group nearly 13 years ago, when my child was 1, because I like to prepare for things extensively and way ahead of time. So I wanted to know I had a community before I jumped into home education, which I did, and it was lovely, and we're still together. The Fresh group, we run living history days. So for example, the kids will choose someone that they're interested in. So for example, the mouse was a character or a historical person who my daughter chose, and she dressed up as the mouse. The mouse was I can't remember her name now, but she was a French spy, or a spy who went into France in World War II. She could have been French. I think she was French. Anyway, my history is not on display here today. Anyway, so they would dress up as the person and present some information about the person. And we would also have cooking from that country or era. What else do we do? That's more fiction. That's the main one that we do as a specifically historical day at Fresh. The other activities, really the fundamental activity that I really love is what I was talking about in the video, and I cannot fault it. I cannot say, you know, that anything is better than that. It's taking that novel, reading that novel, learning about that period of history, the place, geography, the plotting it on the timeline, really getting to know the characters in the book, getting an empathy for them, feeling some form of what's similar to me in character, what's similar with them, what would I do in that circumstance. It's a way of getting artificial experience as an individual to then draw on when you're interacting with other people in the outside world. That's one of the main purposes of reading, as far as I'm concerned, artificial experience, where you don't have to have the perilous journey and the dangers, but you still get to experience the thrill, the fear. How did the decision go? What was the consequence of that decision? Was it a happy ending or was it a disaster? So read the historical fiction. Go to a museum if you can. Get in touch with artifacts, primary sources that somehow were mentioned in the in the novel, and really that mummy one was the best experience. The mummy exhibition that they had at Powerhouse Museum a few years ago was just stunning, because we went up to this little, they had this like tray thing with this lid, perspex lid on it, and inside it had incense, myrrh, honey, and dom nuts, and all of that was in the book, described in the book, but you can't smell it and you can't taste it. So going to the museum and smelling these things, frankincense, and what is that? What does it actually smell like? Was chilling. It was just amazing. And seeing just the sort of foods that they were eating there on display made it real. It was really quite thrilling. And then they had this little hole in the story, The Golden Goblet, which is a really good book. It's got some challenging themes in it. You might want to read it first if you've got a sensitive child. Pi's just no problem. She reads everything. It had a section where you were in a tomb, in a Egyptian tomb, and it was very dark. And so they had a sort of tunnel that was built into something. It didn't, it wasn't that tomby, but it was dark. And going in, we could talk about the story, and going in and then sort of pretend play that we're going into the tomb, and it's it just makes it really good. Sort of pretend, doing some pretend play, and I still do that with my teenager, so I will never stop. What else? What is really, it's just dressing up. Playing games is good. We couldn't work out how to play this medieval game, but I'm going to take it with me to the next Abbey festival. My ensemble's been performing at the medieval festival in the Abbey in Caboolture in Queensland. Fingers crossed it happens. It's in July. I don't know if we're going to be allowed. It's huge. It's something, I'm not really sure how many tens of thousands of people go there. 50,000 people. It's absolutely massive, and it's on like 14 acres. They have flaming trebuchet. They have every political group from the medieval periods, over 1,000 years, represented there. They've got jousting. Jousting's really disappointing, though, I have to say, because they don't use proper jousting sticks with metal tips. They have these little plastic ones that you don't even hear it when they hit the shield. So I'd much prefer the jousting down in St Ives Showground Medieval Festival in Sydney. That's proper jousting, and people really get hurt, and they choose to do that to themselves. So don't worry about me saying, well, I really enjoy watching it, because it's thrilling stuff, seeing a real joust. Anyway, when there's lots and lots of stores at these medieval festivals or historical festivals, if you don't know how to do something, how to play a game, how to do maths in the medieval period, or how did they do that kind of embroidery, or how was that illumination in a book painted, how was paper made, what's vellum, how was music performed, what are the authentic instruments, and what do they look like and sound like, and why aren't they played now? All those questions can be answered by all the enthusiastic volunteers that come to these reenactment festivals. They're incredible value, and that's a really, really good way of interacting with history, with people who are enthusiastic about it, who dress up and live it. That's really cool. And sleeping on site is really fun too. I have done that in Sydney, and it's very noisy. There's a lot of revelry once all the crowds go out and the fires are going, and you can hear this suckling pig sort of on the fire. Oh, it's fabulous. Visiting museums and places of historic interest. So only Australian history. Anything else is picked up from watching movies, reading fiction. I'd love to love a list of fiction. Need to chat with Erin, methinks. Okay, yeah, Erin had a great talk about her book lists, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's on her blogs, searchable. That one of the things my daughter did. She's always been a great reader. That's always been a thing. When she did Troy, she read 3, and I got all of this from that book, all of these books, and I get a lot of Kindle books because I do not have the storage space for loads and loads of history books, historical fiction. She got 3 different historical fiction novels from that book on 3 different perspectives of the Battle of Troy, one from the Greeks and Macedonians, and how one from a girl's point of view, and anyway, it was fascinating seeing how well she could talk about the Battle of Troy and have this sort of affinity with the people and the settings and everything. You know, it's all about relating to yourself again so that it becomes relevant to you. That was just invaluable learning, and she just was happy to read the books, so I ain't gonna mess with that. You go read. If you just read, if your child is reading, then you're done. You're done. They can learn anything, and that's something I'm always really big about. You can learn anything you put your mind to if you choose to. Like, I'm about to start learning how diesel engines work. I don't know anything about diesel engines. I knew nothing. I know absolutely nothing, but I'm about to do that so that I can be more useful on the James Craig 1874 bark ship with 25 sails and a sea boat, which is for sea rescues at sea, which I've done a few times. I really like it because it's so weird for me to do such a physical and dangerous and kind of exciting physical thing. I'm a musician and academic-y type person, and I think about things. Doing physical things is a new thing, so I believe you can learn anything, and I'm about to start learning about diesel engines, which will be fascinating, so I can look after the speedboat, 25 horsepower beast that I can go aquaplaning on, which is really fun. Anyhow, back to the point. Anything else? Yes. Movies? As long as you take the movies with a grain of salt, using... Same with historical fiction. If you're using historical fiction, there is liabilities. There are liberties being taken. Okay, so don't just rely on historical novels or movie interpretations of historical events, because they're through the lens of somebody else. That is part of critical thinking development, being able to discern when something's made up, to discern when something's like an opinion, or whether it's based on primary sources. What primary sources are they? Can I have a look at them? So that's the trick. You need that's sort of the power you can, or the superpower you can gain from studying history with a reasonable level of kind of interest in the primary sources, is to be able to think critically, put it within context, then apply what happened there to today, and then you can use it to make good decisions for yourself or your community or the world if you happen to be that powerful. And that's something to think about if you're just going to rely on movies or whatever. I mean, there's some great stuff. Like, I just saw this the other day. I actually had to go for searching for this. I had this, we came up to doing Captain Cook. And I think that was with Story of the World. And in the 3rd year of study. And I remembered from childhood watching this fantastic mini-series, called, I don't even know what it's called. What's it called? Oh, Captain James Cook, 1987. I had this, I remembered the music, because I'm a musician, I tend to memorize music and remember it, and I remembered certain scenes in there because I was probably grade 5 or 6 when I watched it and thought, "Ooh, look at that." Anyway, Captain Cook from 1987. I found it in some random archive. Oh, I can't remember what's the name. The actor's name is really lovely. Keith Mitchell. He was brilliant. He died not that long ago. And he was this is a fantastic mini-series about Captain Cook, and it's good quality. It's real. It's proper historical facts. Within reason, because there are actors interpreting the characters. This one's also a really good book, but I mean, this is historical fiction. Horatio Hornblower. I watched this a decade ago, a long time ago, and then I started sailing on the James Craig, one of those sorts of things, and then the second time I watched it with my daughter, I went, "Oh my God, I actually understand what they're saying now." Because I could understand the language. I'd learnt the language on the deck. So that was really funny. It was like a whole new world had opened up. I actually understand what they're saying. It's not just noise. What else? What's another way of doing history? Maybe I should talk about briefly how you can teach history or teach all the other subjects through history. That might be interesting. You can turn them into unit studies if that's your thing. I'm not that organized. Turn it into, English can be ticked off in history. Mathematics can be ticked off in history. So, for example, my daughter is currently studying something called the History of Science as a project, as a program, and she's just working through it at her own pace, and I hands off, whatever you want to do, because she's quite good. She sits down and, is interested in teaching herself things. So I said, I tell her to take days off. Actually, I think it's called The Maths Book. Yes, it is. It's called The Maths Book, and it has the history of different types of mathematical equation or theorem that was discovered or uncovered, described, and proven. And that's a fascinating way of doing maths for a girl who doesn't really like doing maths. Not a mathematical girl. I've tried. The way I prefer her to have at this stage as a almost 14-year-old who's going to be going off to do an apprenticeship soon is an appreciation of what maths can do. I mean, she's at grade level. It's not like she's behind in some way that's worrisome. It's more just she doesn't enjoy it. So if she doesn't enjoy doing equations and things, fine. She has an appreciation of mathematics through learning about the history of mathematics, learning about the people who did the mathematical equations. So that's good. And she's got a few books like that. Archimedes, a book about Archimedes, a book about can't remember. Well, so that's maths. Then you've got learning science through history. So this one's interesting, and this is what I got from the Well-Trained Mind. And again, I don't do everything in the Well-Trained Mind. The first time I read the Well-Trained Mind 12 years ago, I immediately put it down and said, "You can't do that to a child. It's not right." I just thought, wow, how on earth do I do that? And that was the first sort of home education sort of text I'd read. Then I read all sorts of others. But then I came back to the Well-Trained Mind and went, I get it. The idea of interrelationships of subjects the idea of cross-curricular education. I didn't do Greek, or we did try a little Latin and then gave up on that. That was just bridge too far. And I backed away on a lot of writing. It was just not going to work for my child, but that's okay. We improvised. With the well-trained mind and science, I really like this idea. In the first year of history, you're studying what ancient peoples were doing, 5000 BCE through to the fall of the Roman Empire. Now, in that period of history, you have the Greeks, who are doing incredible mathematics and incredible biological observation of the world. What they can see around them, that was their limitation. So in order to make it contextual learning, putting science as biology as a subject for the whole year, in that year with ancient history, it makes it sort of make sense. It gives you these little pegs of knowledge and a period of time and a geography to put them
together, and that worked really, really well. For more information on the classical trivium structuring of history, please go to my ebook, which is part of this course, to learn more, and all of the links for books and websites are also available in that book. So I hope you've enjoyed the talk on history and geography, how and why. And thank you again for listening to my presentation.
Now, thank you for that, Mavanwi. We also love Story of the World here. We're going through it for the second time now. I went through it for the first time with all the kids a few years ago, and now I'm going through it with just the boys, and we always have a bit of fun with that. I also really like your roll-up timeline, because we have one stashed in a tube somewhere from a house where we used to have a lot of wall space. So I think I'm going to have to pull that out and see if we can adapt it into a scroll setup. So if you also enjoyed that, don't forget to head over to edconsult.com.au. Mavanwi has lots of fantastic information on there, especially to do with tertiary education for homeschoolers. So if that's something that's coming up for you, or if you just want some educated answers to all the questions you get about how will they get into uni, then make sure you check that out. All right, so thank you again, and thank you all for watching. I will see you again tonight with April Jeremy, who will be walking us through financial assistance for homeschoolers and the NDIS. So I'll see you then.